In this video, we're going to talk about design and design processes, specifically a rational design process and an idea-centric design process. First, I want to talk a little bit about design because design is a very broad idea that's used in a lot of different disciplines. And it's actually kind of an interesting idea. People even study it. How do we come to make something that works and fits for something else? So I want to share you definitions by 3 different scholars that's going to help us start thinking about what this process of design is. First is David Perkins. He talked about a design as a structure adapted to a purpose. So if we have a purpose, for example, opening a door, we create something adapted to help us with that, like a doorknob. Nielsen and Stolderman talked about design as a process of moving from the universal, general, particular to the ultimate particular, the specific design we're using. So universal might be thinking more about abstract principles of physics or the like as it applies to opening a door. What designers do is they might take that information, but they move that into the actual devices for opening a door, for example. And there's not just one way to open a door. There's a lot of different ways, and it depends on the specific purpose or particular that door is in. The door may need a lock, or it may not. It might want to look kind of fancy on an older building without worrying so much about safety, like this one over here that's fancy but could probably be picked very easily. Designers create something for a specific purpose, depending on all the context around it. Finally, Donald Schoen talked about how designers make things out of materials of a situation under conditions of complexity and uncertainty. That's important because when we design something, we don't know what we're making until we get there. That's the difference between designing something and just making something. When we design, we don't know, it's complex and uncertain. We have to figure out our own path forward. So these 3 ideas to keep in mind: design is adapting something to a purpose, and it's a specific purpose for something specific in a specific context, and then it's done in complexity and uncertainty. We have to figure out how to do it. Now, ways to deal with this complexity and uncertainty vary. A lot of people who come to media design or designing for learning design come from an instructional design perspective. Traditionally, instructional designers took kind of a rational perspective on design, where they tried to create a more steady way of going through it. The other way to look at it is an action-centric, and I'm borrowing these terms from Wagner in the Becoming a Learning Designer chapter in the Design for Learning book on EdTech books. So a little more specifics about rational. It's the more traditional. We're looking at optimizing solutions through data and analysis through a specific process. So we're process oriented. We're taking steps to take when designing instruction. A lot of this comes from the historical foundation of instructional design during World War II, when they needed to train a lot of military folks quickly. And the best way to do this was to optimize a process that is going to be consistent each time. So they're going to create instructional materials through a very specific process. And that's where we get something like, for example, ADDIE: analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. Traditionally, this is often seen as a very linear process, but people have tried to open it up a little bit more and say, it's not always straight across. Sometimes it is a little more of a cycle. Another model is the Dick and Carey model, which provides a lot more detail of the steps we take to go from our purpose to something that's going to fit in that ultimate particular to meet our purpose. One that's a little more open-ended is Merrill's pebble in the pond model, where we start with a problem and then we build our instructional design around that problem. So in rational design, instructional design processes, we generally set about a specific process we're going to follow, and that helps us efficiently move from beginning to end. And action-centric is more focused on thinking broadly about things and finding a more broader range of ideas. So we're using creativity. We're going to do what we call framing and reframing, looking at the problem and solution in different ways. And it's more of an improvisation where there's not as much of a direct process to go through. That's when we design by exploring something, prototyping, and iterating. One way that people have made to try to help this type of action-centric is through design thinking. You might have heard of. A little bit of the irony here is that they kind of took that action-centric approach and put it into a more process-oriented thing. A lot of design thinking stems from looking at how architects work and others that work in a very messy, open-ended context, and then trying to figure out how to help other people work that way. And so it's kind of like training wheels. It's kind of taking you step by step to start getting the experience of learning through ideating and prototyping and testing. And I think pretty much all people in design thinking these days say it's not a linear exactly thing. Usually we're going to cycle back and forth. These are just different activities we're going to be doing. But ultimately, we're figuring it out by doing it, by trying things out and then adjusting. I like this model a little bit more because it looks at a problem and researching and learning about that problem, reframing the problem, maybe looking at it differently to get to a specific problem. And then from that specific problem, then doing that ideating and prototyping to a specific solution. Of course, sometimes your problem can change while you're looking at the specific problem and solution, but it's another way of thinking about that type of action-centric if you're going to put some steps on it. If you want to keep it a little more open-ended, it's more like you do something or make something, and then you learn from what you did or made. Similar what to Donald Schoon talked about action and reflection, where we act and then we reflect. And a lot of us do this normally in our day-to-day life. We do something, we make adjustments based on what happens. It's just a more formalized way of doing that. Maybe not formalized isn't really the right word, but intentional way perhaps of doing that. So in action-centric design, we can think of acting as when we're sketching or prototyping about something, and reflecting is when we're looking at critique and determining, testing and critiquing something. And these are the ideas that we're going to cover in our next video. But to close this one out, takeaways: design is creating for a purpose in complexity. Rational instructional design they focus on a specific process to optimize your design. And idea-centric focuses on creativity, problem framing, and iteration. And I should add, it doesn't have to be either or. You can do a combination of rational and idea-centric design. And also, there's some contexts that one might work better than the other, and that is okay. Thanks for watching.